They laughed when the Black Maid misaligned the plates, until the Mafia Boss corrected their placement. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Emma Johnson wiped the sweat from her brow as she balanced the tray filled with crystal plates and polished silverware, her hands slightly trembling despite years of practice. The grand dining room of Reynolds' private event space glittered under the soft glow of chandelier lights, reflecting off the polished mahogany tables and fine china, a stark contrast to the modest apartment she called home in Brooklyn. Guests in tailored suits and sparkling dresses murmured among themselves, some glancing with curiosity, others with thinly veiled disdain as Emma carefully approached the central table. A slight misalignment of a plate caused a ripple of laughter, sharp and dismissive, echoing across the room. Emma's heart skipped a beat, her cheeks warming as she knelt slightly to adjust the tray, feeling the weight of the room's judgment. The guests whispered, their eyes flicking toward each other as if sharing a private joke at her expense, the sound of their amusement cutting through the background of clinking glasses and soft classical music. She caught snippets of mocking comments, a sharp, "Didn't she learn how to carry a tray?" and "How clumsy can one person be?" that made her fingers tense around the edges of the silver platter. Emma swallowed, drawing a deep breath to steady herself, her mind racing with both embarrassment and resolve. She reminded herself that she had worked tirelessly to earn this position, that she had navigated every challenge, from mastering proper etiquette to learning the specific preferences of high-profile clients, all in the hopes of supporting her mother and younger brother. The laughter, while biting, could not strip away the determination in her heart. From the far end of the room, a shadow moved with purposeful grace. Dominic Reynolds, the host of the evening and the figure whose reputation filled the city's tabloids, watched quietly from behind a column, his piercing blue eyes narrowing slightly as he observed the subtle tension in Emma's posture. His presence, commanding and almost palpable even from a distance, brought a hush over those who had been observing the young maid. He did not speak, did not move abruptly, but the authority in his stillness made the guests' whispers falter, a silent reminder of the power in the room. Emma, unaware of the scrutiny, focused on her task, adjusting the plates with meticulous care, her dark skin catching the warm light, highlighting her determination and poise even under pressure. Each movement she made was deliberate, each placement precise, as if her hands could balance not just the plates but the weight of judgment itself. The room seemed to stretch, seconds dragging, yet the subtle shift in atmosphere hinted at a change. The once carefree laughter dimmed as the presence of Dominic Reynolds became more than just a figure in the background. It became a force of unspoken consequence. Emma straightened, a faint smile crossing her lips as she completed her careful adjustment, and in that suspended moment, the story of dignity, attention, and quiet strength began to unfold. Emma Johnson moved through the room with careful precision, each step measured against the plush carpet that muffled her footsteps, the faint scent of polished wood and fresh flowers lingering in the air. The guests, still adjusting to the subtle shift in atmosphere, resumed their quiet chatter, though the laughter that had pierced the room moments ago had all but vanished. Emma's focus was unwavering, her eyes scanning each table, ensuring that every plate, fork, and glass was aligned with the meticulous standards she had been trained to uphold. The weight of responsibility pressed gently on her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a silent challenge that she met with quiet determination. Her mind wandered briefly to her morning routine, the early subway rides through Brooklyn, the hurried breakfast shared with her mother, and the soft laughter of her younger brother, moments of normalcy that contrasted sharply with the grandeur and scrutiny of the room around her. Dominic Reynolds, standing just beyond the edge of the main hall, observed her movements with an intensity that was both commanding and protective, his tall frame and tailored suit casting a subtle shadow that seemed to stretch across the polished floor toward her. He did not intervene, yet his presence alone altered the rhythm of the space, bringing a measured calm to the formerly chaotic whispers. Emma felt a strange mix of nerves and reassurance, an awareness that her efforts were seen and appreciated by someone whose judgment carried immense weight. The faint glimmer of chandeliers reflected in her eyes as she adjusted the silverware, her fingers tracing the contours of each piece with a practiced grace, mindful of balance and symmetry, the small details that defined excellence in her role. Around her, the soft hum of conversation continued, punctuated occasionally by the clink of crystal or the subtle scraping of chairs, a background that both intimidated and grounded her. She noticed a young couple leaning slightly forward, watching her with curiosity, perhaps questioning her skill, perhaps marveling at her composure under scrutiny. Emma's breath steadied as she reminded herself that the task was not just about aligning plates, but about maintaining dignity, embodying a professionalism that transcended the derision of others, a silent statement of resilience and grace. She moved to the next table, carefully angling the silverware to catch the light just so, ensuring that the presentation mirrored the elegance of the venue. Dominic's eyes followed every motion, noting the subtle poise in her posture, the careful modulation of her gestures, a silent acknowledgment of the courage it took to carry herself with such composure in a room that had momentarily been hostile. Emma completed her round, a slight nod acknowledging the satisfaction she felt at a job executed well, her gaze lifting briefly to meet the distant but attentive eyes of Dominic, a fleeting connection that conveyed respect and unspoken understanding. In that moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. The mundane act of aligning plates transformed into a testament of perseverance, professionalism, and quiet strength, a prelude to the events that would further illuminate her character and the depth of her resolve. The evening light in the dining room shifted subtly as Emma Johnson continued her careful journey between the tables, the reflections from the crystal glassware casting gentle patterns across the polished surfaces. Her hands remained steady, yet her mind raced with thoughts of the brief laughter that had echoed moments ago, a reminder of the fragile perception of competence in the eyes of those who judged too quickly. The soft hum of conversation surrounded her, punctuated by the distant tinkle of silver utensils and the quiet shuffle of feet on the carpet, each sound a subtle marker of the high society environment in which she now navigated. Dominic Reynolds remained a shadow at the edge of the room, his posture commanding and yet non-intrusive, a silent observer of her diligence. His eyes, sharp and perceptive, followed each of her motions, noting the grace in how she balanced the weight of the tray and the precise alignment of plates and glasses, an appreciation unspoken but unmistakable. Emma felt a quiet reassurance at his presence, the knowledge that her efforts were being recognized by someone whose judgment mattered more than the whispers of the guests. As she approached a larger round table adorned with fine linens and polished silver, she noticed subtle imperfections in the arrangement of utensils left by the previous serving staff. Without hesitation, she corrected each item with meticulous care, her movements fluid and practiced, the gentle click of glass and silver providing a rhythmic accompaniment to her focused attention. A few guests observed her silently, their initial amusement replaced by a respectful curiosity, as if they sensed the quiet confidence and poise that guided her actions. Emma's thoughts briefly drifted to her early morning walks through Brooklyn, the routine of helping her mother prepare breakfast, the laughter of her younger brother, all memories that grounded her amidst the opulence of the present surroundings. Each step she took was deliberate, balancing professionalism with a personal pride in her work, a silent testament to her resilience and commitment. Dominic's gaze remained steady, noting the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the way her calm persistence had begun to command the room, transforming what was once an uncomfortable scene into one marked by quiet respect. The ambient light accentuated the gleam of the crystal and the warmth of her skin, a visual contrast to the cool formality of the guest's attire, highlighting both her humanity and her grace. As she completed the round, Emma allowed herself a brief moment to straighten her back and exhale slowly, acknowledging internally the satisfaction of a task well executed. Her eyes lifted, meeting the distant yet focused gaze of Dominic Reynolds, a shared understanding passing silently between them, a recognition of effort, attention, and the dignity inherent in doing one's work with care. The room settled into a steady rhythm once more, the soft murmur of conversation blending with the subtle clinks and hums of the refined space, creating an environment where competence, poise, and understated strength had quietly asserted themselves without fanfare, setting the stage for the developments yet to unfold as the evening progressed. The soft lighting of the grand dining room cast gentle shadows across the polished surfaces as Emma Johnson continued her meticulous rounds, the faint aroma of fresh flowers mingling with the subtle scent of fine china and polished wood. Each movement she made was purposeful, the alignment of plates and silverware a testament to her attention to detail and unwavering professionalism. Guests at nearby tables observed her with varying degrees of interest and curiosity, their earlier amusement replaced by an understated respect for the precision and composure she displayed under pressure. Emma's mind, however, remained focused on the task at hand, her thoughts quietly balancing the memory of her modest Brooklyn apartment with the opulence of the event space, the two worlds converging in the rhythm of her steps and the careful placement of each item. Dominic Reynolds, standing near the far end of the room with his hands clasped behind his back, continued to watch her silently, his presence both commanding and reassuring. The tall figure, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, exuded authority that seemed to ripple through the air, an unspoken reminder to the guests that actions carried weight beyond immediate perception. Emma approached a particularly large table in the center of the room, the fine linens and sparkling glassware presenting both a challenge and an opportunity to demonstrate her skill. Her hands adjusted the silverware with delicate precision, the subtle clink of polished metal providing a steady rhythm against the quiet hum of conversation. She noted the angles of each utensil, the spacing between plates, and the symmetry of the arrangement, every detail a small assertion of control and poise in a space that had momentarily been dominated by judgment. The murmurs of the guests continued around her, but Emma moved with confidence, her dark skin catching the warm ambient light and highlighting the elegance of her motions. Dominic's eyes followed each careful adjustment, noting the calm determination in her posture, the understated strength that allowed her to maintain composure in the midst of scrutiny. The subtle shift in atmosphere did not go unnoticed. Whispers softened, attention shifted, and a quiet appreciation began to replace the earlier derision. Emma's breath was steady, her focus unwavering as she completed her task, a faint smile betraying a sense of satisfaction at a job well executed. Dominic took a slow step forward, his presence moving closer to her without a word, a silent acknowledgment of her competence and resilience. The interaction between the observer and the observed carried a weight that the room seemed to feel instinctively, a transformation from tension to mutual recognition. Emma adjusted the final plate, ensuring alignment that reflected both precision and grace, and in that moment, the room seemed to hold its collective breath, suspended between the previous amusement and the developing sense of decorum and respect. Dominic's gaze met hers briefly, a subtle nod that conveyed both acknowledgment and reassurance, a quiet signal that the balance of power and dignity had been gently restored. The chandeliers above reflected off the glassware, creating a soft shimmer that mirrored the calm pride in Emma's eyes, each detail of the space harmonizing with the steady rhythm of her movements and the silent affirmation of her capabilities. In this carefully measured moment, the dining room was no longer merely a stage for judgment or ridicule, but a place where poise, competence, and quiet integrity asserted themselves, setting the tone for the remainder of the evening and the interactions yet to unfold. Emma Johnson paused for a brief moment at the end of her route, allowing herself a single deep breath as the ambient lighting reflected off the glassware and silverware she had meticulously adjusted. The gentle hum of conversation filled the dining room once more, yet the atmosphere had shifted. The earlier tension caused by the mocking laughter had dissolved into a quiet appreciation, an unspoken acknowledgment of her skill and composure. Guests turned their attention to Dominic Reynolds, whose presence had remained subtle yet undeniably commanding, his watchful eyes scanning the room with an awareness that suggested both authority and attentiveness. Emma's gaze flicked toward him, and she sensed a silent connection, an understanding that her efforts were recognized and valued by someone whose judgment carried considerable weight. She moved to the buffet table, adjusting the arrangement of plates and cutlery with the same precision, the subtle click of polished silver marking each careful placement, a rhythm that seemed to harmonize with the gentle music playing in the background. The soft flicker of candlelight on the tablecloth accentuated the elegance of the setting, highlighting the contrast between her dark skin and the sparkling glassware, emphasizing both the diligence of her movements and the grace with which she carried herself under observation. Dominic stepped slightly forward, a silent gesture that communicated both approval and attentiveness, his shadow stretching across the floor in a way that seemed to subtly envelop the space, lending an air of quiet reassurance. Emma continued her task, aware of the scrutiny yet undeterred, each adjustment reinforcing her commitment to excellence and the pride she took in her work. The guests, now observing her with softened expressions, whispered amongst themselves, their previous amusement replaced by curiosity and muted admiration for the poise she demonstrated. She reflected briefly on her journey from the crowded streets of Brooklyn to this refined setting, the long hours of training and dedication that had brought her here, the sense of responsibility she carried not only to perform well, but to maintain her dignity amidst judgment. Each placement of a fork or glass was a subtle assertion of control, a quiet statement of her capability, resilience, and grace. The air seemed to pulse with anticipation, the gentle sounds of clinking silverware and hushed voices blending into a backdrop against which her quiet perseverance stood out prominently. Dominic's gaze remained on her, noting the calm precision in her posture and the careful deliberation in her movements, a silent acknowledgment that her actions were making a tangible impression. As Emma adjusted the final piece of silverware on the last table, she allowed herself a faint, measured exhale, her shoulders relaxing slightly while maintaining composure, a small but meaningful gesture of accomplishment. In that suspended moment, the room felt both expansive and intimate, a setting where diligence, quiet strength, and the understated power of presence had subtly transformed the dynamic, preparing the stage for the unfolding events that would further reveal the character, resolve, and the silent narrative of respect and recognition that had begun to take shape. As the evening progressed, the gentle clatter of silverware and the soft murmur of conversations blended seamlessly into the background, creating an environment that was both lively and refined. Emma Johnson moved with measured confidence, her dark skin illuminated by the warm glow of chandeliers reflecting off the polished mahogany tables. Each step she took was purposeful, each adjustment of plates and utensils deliberate, an extension of the quiet pride she carried in her work. She navigated the space with an acute awareness of the guests' attention, the earlier laughter now replaced by subtle glances of appreciation and curiosity, as if they were recognizing the skill and composure that she exhibited under scrutiny. Dominic Reynolds observed from a respectful distance, his tall figure in a tailored suit providing an unspoken presence that conveyed both authority and attentiveness without intrusion. Emma's eyes met his briefly, a fleeting connection that reinforced her sense of assurance, a silent affirmation that her dedication did not go unnoticed. She approached a long, elegantly set table where the guests' silverware had been slightly misaligned during a previous course, the slight imperfections immediately catching her trained eye. With careful, precise motions, she corrected each piece, the soft clinks of polished metal echoing just enough to mark the rhythm of her actions. The room seemed to shift in response to her diligence, a subtle sense of order and decorum beginning to dominate the space, countering the earlier tension and whispers. Emma's thoughts momentarily drifted to her family, the quiet mornings in Brooklyn with her mother preparing breakfast and the laughter of her younger brother filling the modest apartment, grounding her amidst the grandeur surrounding her. She reflected on the effort that had brought her here, the years of dedication and the attention to detail that allowed her to maintain grace even under the scrutiny of those who initially doubted her abilities. Dominic's gaze followed her carefully, noting not only the precision of her movements, but also the calm determination in her posture, the understated strength that radiated through her composed actions. Guests began to murmur among themselves with soft tones of admiration, the previous judgments giving way to recognition of the elegance and competence Emma displayed. Each careful placement reinforced her dignity, a quiet assertion of skill that demanded respect without uttering a single word. As she straightened the final plate and adjusted the last utensil, She felt a subtle sense of accomplishment, the weight of observation transforming into validation and reassurance. Dominic took a measured step forward, his presence bridging the space between them in a way that conveyed both acknowledgment and support, a silent gesture that elevated the atmosphere from one of tentative tension to quiet admiration. The interplay of light on the crystal, the shimmer of polished silver, and the grace in Emma's movements created a visual harmony that reflected her professionalism and integrity, a testament to her ability to navigate a space that once held doubt and scrutiny with resilience, poise, and unwavering composure. In that precise moment, the room seemed to hold its collective breath, recognizing the shift from judgment to respect, the balance of power and dignity subtly reaffirmed, and the stage perfectly set for the developments that would follow. The room had settled into a calm rhythm, the previous tension replaced by an understated harmony that seemed to emanate from Emma Johnson's careful movements and steady presence. Her dark skin glimmered softly in the ambient light, and the polished surfaces of the mahogany tables and crystal glassware reflected the subtle shifts in illumination as chandeliers above cast gentle, dancing patterns across the dining room. Guests had begun to relax, their whispered conversations resuming, though the occasional glance toward Emma revealed a renewed sense of respect and curiosity, a recognition of the poise and competence she displayed. Dominic Reynolds stood at a discreet distance, his tall frame and perfectly tailored navy suit projecting an aura of authority and attentiveness, his gaze never leaving Emma as he absorbed the graceful efficiency of her actions. Each adjustment she made, each plate she aligned, seemed to resonate with a quiet confidence that carried through the room, a subtle statement that precision, care, and dignity were inseparable. Emma's mind briefly reflected on the contrast between this refined environment and the modest apartments of Brooklyn she called home. The early mornings helping her mother prepare breakfast, the quiet moments spent with her younger brother, and the lessons in perseverance and humility that had guided her to this point. She allowed these memories to strengthen her resolve, reminding herself that the small details, the angle of a fork, the spacing of a plate, represented more than mere protocol. They were expressions of care, discipline, and professionalism. Dominic's presence, though unobtrusive, lent an additional layer of reassurance, the silent acknowledgment in his posture conveying trust and appreciation for her diligence. Guests began to murmur softly, their eyes no longer critical but reflective, noting the subtle mastery and graceful composure that Emma embodied. As she moved toward the final tables, the interplay of light and shadow accentuated her focused expression, the soft shimmer of silverware and crystal amplifying the visual rhythm of her movements. Dominic took a subtle step closer, the silent proximity a quiet recognition of her skill and the way her presence had transformed the atmosphere, a gesture that spoke volumes without a single word. Emma's movements remained deliberate and precise, a dance of careful alignment and measured gestures, each one reinforcing her quiet command of the space and the respect she had earned through her composure. She completed her final round, straightening the last plate and adjusting the final fork with a sense of controlled satisfaction, her gaze rising briefly to meet Dominic's, a mutual acknowledgment passing between them. The room held a sense of collective pause, the transition from mockery to admiration complete, the weight of perception and judgment gently realigned. In that suspended moment, the elegance of the surroundings, the refinement of her actions, and the subtle affirmation from Dominic Reynolds created a space where professionalism, dignity, and quiet authority converged, setting the tone for the evening and leaving an indelible impression on all who had witnessed it. The room seemed to hold its breath as Emma Johnson completed her meticulous rounds, the gentle reflections from chandeliers dancing across the polished surfaces and crystal glassware, highlighting the careful precision of her work. Each plate, fork, and glass she adjusted carried a subtle weight, a silent testament to her diligence and commitment to excellence, and the guests who had once laughed now observed with a newfound respect that softened the edges of their previous judgment. The soft hum of conversation continued around her, punctuated occasionally by the quiet clink of silverware, yet the atmosphere had transformed. The once dismissive glances were replaced with subtle nods and appreciative whispers. Dominic Reynolds, positioned discreetly at the edge of the room, observed every movement with measured attention, his tall figure in a tailored navy suit radiating both authority and understated support. His eyes, sharp and perceptive, captured the grace and skill in Emma's movements, noting the quiet confidence she displayed while maintaining perfect composure under scrutiny. Emma's thoughts drifted momentarily to her family in Brooklyn, the early mornings helping her mother, the comforting routines of home, and the small triumphs that had guided her to this moment, grounding her amidst the grandeur and scrutiny of the present environment. She moved to the central table, where an elegant arrangement of plates and glassware demanded careful attention, her hands gliding smoothly over the surface as she ensured perfect symmetry, each adjustment reflecting her commitment to professionalism and precision. The guests followed her movements with softened expressions, the shift from amusement to admiration becoming tangible as they recognized the deliberate care in her actions and the quiet strength she carried. Dominic stepped slightly forward, not intrusively, but with a subtle assertion of presence that conveyed both acknowledgment and reassurance, a silent communication that her efforts were seen and valued. Emma's posture remained poised, her movements deliberate, and the soft shimmer of light on silver and crystal highlighted the harmony between her skill and the refined environment, emphasizing the grace with which she executed her responsibilities. The room's energy seemed to align with her rhythm, a steady pulse of respect and decorum replacing the earlier tension, as guests absorbed the example of diligence and composure she embodied. Each step she took, each item she adjusted, reinforced her quiet command of the space and the dignity inherent in her performance. Dominic's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer, conveying silent recognition and approval, a gesture that transcended words and subtly influenced the room's atmosphere. As Emma straightened the final plate and ensured every piece of silverware was perfectly aligned, a calm satisfaction passed through her, her eyes meeting Dominic's briefly in mutual acknowledgment of effort and resilience. In that suspended moment, the dining room was transformed, the interplay of light, precision, and quiet strength creating an environment where professionalism, dignity, and subtle authority had quietly asserted themselves, preparing the space for the unfolding events and interactions that would continue to highlight the balance of respect and recognition. The dining room had finally settled into a quiet equilibrium, the soft hum of conversations blending with the gentle clinking of glassware and silverware, each sound marking the seamless restoration of decorum. Emma Johnson stood near the last table, her hands steady as she made the final adjustments, the polished surfaces reflecting the warm glow of chandeliers above, casting a soft radiance over her dark skin and the pristine arrangement she had meticulously created. The guests, having witnessed her unwavering focus and attention to detail, now observed with muted admiration, the earlier amusement replaced by a sense of respect for her professionalism and poise. Dominic Reynolds, positioned discreetly at the far end of the room, allowed his gaze to linger on her for a moment longer, a subtle nod acknowledging the diligence, resilience, and quiet authority she had demonstrated throughout the evening. Emma's thoughts drifted to the journey that had brought her here, the long mornings navigating crowded subways in Brooklyn, the modest breakfasts shared with her mother, and the encouragement from her younger brother that had fueled her perseverance. Each plate she aligned, each utensil she straightened, was more than an act of service. It was an assertion of competence, a reflection of her integrity, and a demonstration of the composure that had carried her through countless moments of scrutiny and challenge. The atmosphere in the room had transformed, tension replaced by an undercurrent of respect, a subtle shift that spoke volumes without a single word being uttered. Guests whispered quietly among themselves, exchanging glances that carried acknowledgment of the grace and skill Emma had exhibited, their previous judgment tempered by the recognition of her steadfast dedication. Dominic stepped slightly closer, his presence commanding yet unobtrusive, a silent gesture that conveyed both acknowledgment and appreciation, reinforcing the sense of order and quiet dignity that now permeated the space. Emma adjusted the final glass, her fingers tracing the contours with practiced precision, a faint exhale marking a moment of personal satisfaction for a task executed with care and integrity. The interplay of light on crystal and polished silver mirrored the harmony of her movements and the measured attention she had maintained, transforming a simple act of service into a display of professionalism and character. In this suspended moment, the dining room seemed to pause, acknowledging the subtle shift from derision to respect, the balance of power and dignity now quietly reaffirmed. Dominic's eyes met hers once more, a brief, meaningful connection passing between them, conveying recognition of her efforts and the silent triumph of perseverance. As the evening light softened and shadows lengthened, the guests absorbed the atmosphere, the lessons of patience, attentiveness, and quiet strength evident in every detail of the arrangement, leaving an impression that would linger long after the last plate was cleared. Emma straightened her posture, the faintest smile touching her lips, a testament to her resilience, professionalism, and the dignity that had guided her through the scrutiny and subtle challenges of the evening. And in that delicate, quiet triumph, the room, the guests, and Dominic Reynolds all bore witness to the quiet power of grace and unwavering attention, a gentle reminder that respect and recognition are earned through persistence, composure, and care.